Hey, I'm Sam Hahn, and you're listening to the Weldon Green Podcast, a show about performance and esports. Weldon Green is the performance coach and sports psychology trainer for esports athletes focused on helping them optimize their game, learn faster, stop tilting, and get in the zone. We're starting off the show with the Ask Weldon segment, where we take questions and answers from the Ask Weldon YouTube show revolving around a specific topic. And that topic is...
Teamwork.
Oh, brother.
We can do anything when we have teamwork.
Yep, that's right, teamwork. Most of us are playing games that involve other team members. In fact, multiplayer games are so popular because you get to play with your friends, coordinate complicated strategies, and share experiences with others. In everyday life, we see team dynamics in play. At work, you deliver goods and services as a team. Sports, even individual sports, you train with your team and you go to competitions with your team. School, we have team projects and lab partners. Now, working in a team, building up a team, and ways in improving team dynamics are all things we'll touch on this episode. So, let's start from the start. How do you build a good team environment for a brand new team?
Start getting to know each other in terms of ambitions, driving forces, and ways of experiencing trauma. So by that I mean that usually I would go into a gaming house for a pro team and I would ask them, how well do you know each other? And say, well, we've been playing and living together in the same house for 6 months or a year or 3 months. And I say, well, how well do you know each other? And I say, pretty well. I know everything about this guy. And then I would say, like, what's his favorite color or what's his favorite food? And they'd be like, no idea. And I'd be like, okay, well, what year did he graduate high school? And they'd be like, did you even graduate high school? So these stories of our life, of our motivations, so you could ask them, why are you here on this team? And they would look at me with this blank face like, oh, I don't know. These stories and narratives of our life that we build up within ourselves do not get easily expressed across training times. So when you come into a new environment, a new team, you need to make sure those narratives get told to each other. You need to have storytelling time, which means usually one-on-one. So dyads are the best for this, two people together doing an extended kind of activity. And the problem with that is there's a 5-man team, so then one person has to be with you. So usually an hour is good for this. 2 people as a dyad for an hour. You have a scripted set of questions they have to get through, asking each other increasingly more intimate questions about each other, and then you have your 1 hour session with that player, and then every week you cycle until you get through 5 weeks and you've met with everybody and they've met with each other. That's something that I recommend. And yeah, I kind of like created my own set of questions that I wanted them to work through. You can steal from places around the web. You can steal from team building exercises. You can think about your own narrative in your life and construct something from that. You can go to the New York Times and search 30 questions to fall in love. And you can read about this researcher who came up with these 30 questions for 2 people to fall in love with each other, which are ranked basically from 1 to 30 in level of intimacy. And you can like pick and choose from that list and try to build up that kind of bond.
So I went on to Google and found the article Welden was talking about. It's actually called The 36 Questions That Lead to Love. Here are some of the questions. What would constitute a perfect day for you? How do you feel about your relationship with your mother? If you were to die this evening with no opportunity to communicate with anyone, what would you regret not having told someone? Why haven't you told them yet? The last task in the exercise is to stare into each other's eyes for 4 minutes. Intense, right? But like Welden says, there are many different lists and some questions will fit your team and players better than others. So do what you see fit for your situation. So what if you're not starting from scratch and you're already part of a team or have a team? However, it's not perfect and there are already issues that have to be dealt with. Here's a common problem. What can you do to build a better team environment if your teammates tend to tilt and blame each other when they lose?
Understand what's at stake. So when people lose, essentially there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame going around. So there's frustration or anxiety for the person who did pretty well in that game and lost anyway. And then there's shame for the people who know that they kind of cost the game and are embarrassed by it and are willing to do anything except confront the people that they lost the game for. I remember I was working with a pro player who lost a particularly important game, and he was willing to admit to every single person in the world that it was his fault, like even like over the internet, on an interview if he had to. But he didn't want to admit face to face to his teammates that he knew that he cost the game at one point and was sorry about it. And that is how powerful this emotion of shame is on our behavior as humans. The impact cannot be understated. So we do all sorts of things to kind of control and manage that emotion when it gets really strong after a loss like that. And so you need to understand, first of all, who is in the frustration sphere, who's in the shame sphere, and then your job is to bring everybody to the table and get the elephants out of the room. And usually you do that by putting them right in the middle of the circle. So you address the elephant in the room.
Addressing the elephant isn't the easiest thing, though. It can make people more frustrated or shamed. How do you go about doing this?
I use one particular activity to do that with a team. So if you have a leadership role in the team, if you're a coach or a captain, and if it's the kind of team where you actually need to be productive, like training session after training session, then you get everybody in a circle and you make it a rule that, okay, we're going to go around, we're going to say two things. We're going to say one thing about something that, for example, everybody here doesn't know about you, or your favorite movie when you were in high school, or something that brings everybody's perspective to you to the human level. Like, oh, you are a person with wants and needs and desires and a history and a past and relationships and a family and a brother and a sister, and you wake up and you're worried about things, that kind of human connection. So you share something intimate with the group. Second thing you do is you say the biggest mistake that you made in the game, or the biggest thing that you think of that you remember from that game that you were at fault, or that you regret, or that you feel shame over. And everybody shares something of their own.
Okay, so why and how does this exercise work?
Because everybody is kind of within this universal confession, it opens up the doors for people to confess their shame. And they might avoid the biggest thing, but they might hit a second thing that they can handle sharing. And what this does is, for the people who are frustrated, they see that the person who made the mistake actually does feel bad, and they are mollified. And for the people who are ashamed, they feel good to confess. Confession is good for the soul. And so it mollifies that emotion as well. And it serves to kind of reset switch the group and move them on to the next game. So you kind of control the blaming and the tilting in a way.
And what if this exercise, for some reason, doesn't work with a specific team? Coaching style, scenario, etc. What else could we do?
One-on-one conversations are really good, where you kind of lead them through a discovery of what it is that they're feeling and what it is that would solve it. So what would make you feel better? What would make you feel better? And you delve into that, and they realize, oh, what would make me feel better is if this person admitted that they were wrong, or if I was able to tell them that they were wrong. And if I just was able to say, it's your fault and you screwed me, then I would feel better. And then they realize, oh, maybe that's not the most psychologically mature activity, that I need to rag on somebody in order to make myself feel good. That's something that a bully does, So, and then the fact that they admit, and then you can say, well, maybe they already know that they made a mistake, and you can ask the person, do you know that you made a mistake? And the other person can say, yeah, of course, obviously. And the other person can realize that they don't need to share how much they were hurt by the person losing them the game in order to overcome those emotions. They can just kind of work through them and move forward. And for the shame person, it's really just allowing them to share with you and maybe finding other outlets to do so in a one-on-one kind of conversation.
All right, so basically emotions like shame and frustration are running high after a tilted loss. Things may need to be aired out, conflicts to be discussed, and emotional statuses to be reset. So figure out the method that works best for your team. Now, we've talked about things to work on out of the game. Let's get into things in-game, like shot calling and leadership. What is the best way to develop trust among players so a team can come together under a unified shot caller?
Okay, two things. First of all, you don't need a unified shot caller. You need a unified leader who's decisive. Shot calling, in terms of what you should be doing strategy, should be coming from everybody, but somebody can unify that around a core leadership idea. Right? So shot caller does not mean you listen to my strategy. Shot caller means you listen to my decisiveness. And the number one thing to build trust is to prove that you're working harder than everybody else. So you make a mistake, you own up to it, and then you work to never do it again. You make a mistake, you own up to it. You don't blame your team, you own up to it, and then you work hard to make sure it never happens again. So you're showing up to practice early, you're leaving practice late, you're building diagrams, you're comparing VODs, you're doing all the things above and beyond what a person on the team would do in order to lead the team. And then they trust that you are the kind of person who will put in the work because they want to win, because you like their team. And then you notice something's wrong with somebody and you go talk to them and say, hey, you were kind of off your game today. I just want to make sure you're okay. Like, what's going on? Is it personal? Are you doing all right? Servant leadership. So you're doing things for a greater cause, which is the cause of the group. You notice things that are happening in the group. You notice people that are existing in there. Your attention is focused outward, and you're trying to do the things that you can do to serve them. And then the trust happens, and it comes to you. And before you know it, like, you're the one who is decisively leading them as a moral compass and as a decisive leader.
Decisive leader? Well, how do you become more decisive?
You need to be decisive, and you need to be okay with winning and losing the engagement. So you be decisive about it, and then you say, okay, we learned from that. This is what we learned, and this is what I learned, and this is why I'm never going to do it again, or I am going to do it again, or we're going to try it in a different situation. But at least we did it. Decisiveness. That's really key.
So what happens when you make a call and they don't follow you?
Then you didn't have their trust, and they didn't trust themselves. Either they didn't trust themselves or they didn't trust you. So if you have their trust and they trusted you, then they didn't trust themselves, and that's the vector you need to work on. You could have done it. No, it's okay. You could have pulled it off. Like, I believe in you. That kind of talk.
Okay, so I want to stay on the topic of trusting yourself. One of my buddies, Blake, he's played a ridiculous amount of support games. Every now and then, we'll play together, and I'll play AD carry, which I'm actually not very good at. So when we lane together, he finds an advantage, and he just goes in. Me, being an inexperienced AD carry player, I don't really recognize those opportunities, so there's a little bit of disconnect. So he's become very vocal on our engagements and shot calls the laning phase. As helpful as this is, I still don't always go in, or at least I hesitate a little too often. Now, the key factor here isn't that I don't trust his calls, it's that I don't trust myself, hence the hesitation. I have a feeling I'm not alone on this, and to be honest, I've seen it a lot playing with different friends and league communities as well. Now, on the topic of poor performances, let's talk about choking. How do you deal with choking during competitions?
So a lot of fans misinterpret bad play for choking. And most of the time they're wrong. Most of the time players play up to the level that they can. They don't choke. And they're just worse than their fans wish them to be. Other times players choke, which means that they actually play worse than they should because of the pressure of the environment. And in that case, you have to increase the pressure everywhere else so they get used to coping with pressure. It's just all there is to it. The only way you can practice not choking is by amping up the pressure so that you choke all the time or some of the time, and then you can practice how you cope with that and lower the choking. Okay.
So what do you do if a player breaks down after a loss but still has to play?
So you have to help them reset, and that's individual with every person. You have to know how that player resets, like what it takes, right? So I would approach that by having long conversations with them throughout the season so that you know how it is their normal arc of like overcoming tribulation and triumph and like resetting and what their high performance state is. Another thing you can do is there's this questionnaire called Psychobiosocial States Scale, PBS, Psychobiosocial States. I know that it starts with P, but that's how psycho starts. PBS, scale 20. And you can use that to determine like what your personal individual performance profile looks like. And then you can like, and that's individual. That is something that is unique to you because somebody else's is going to be the opposite. Like Soren's performance state for high performance before performance is different from Peter's. And that's true for every performer. And so what you want to do is identify what theirs is, and then you want to get them back to that equilibrium state by conversation or training or warm-ups or activities or social support or something, whatever it is that they need. Usually it's something along SEAR's lines, SEAR, which is support, empowerment, accountability, or respect.
support, empowerment, accountability, and respect. These are 4 things that can help get a player back into their equilibrium state. Remember, what might work for you is for you, not necessarily them. So if you're not sure what gets them to reset, get to know them better and try to use SEER. Now, as the team progresses, you'll want to start measuring performance to see how the team can improve. How do you measure team performance?
You have to capture metrics at this point. Team performance, obviously winning, losing, but the way that I measure team performance is on trainables. So we have this thing that we need to train, and then we train it. And I track that as it goes. It's quite simple. It's just that it's really easy for you to track wins and losses. It's really hard for you to track other things. But it's not hard for me. I just sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to track, how many times that we pull off a 4-man bot roam. And then I counted, and then we saw if the number improved or not. I wanted to see how many times we avoided getting turret dove top lane before 6 minutes, before our top laner hit level 6. And then I counted, and then I added them together. So it's quite easy to come up with things to track and measure improvement. And they just have to be tied to performance. You have to make sure that you're actually choosing game variables that matter.
There are 2 big things here. 1, the metric must be measurable, and 2, it needs to be performance-based. Let's look at the second one. The goal has to be useful to your team's improvement. Let's say we set the goal to dive the enemy top lane more. It sounds like a good goal, right? And it really could be. But depending on the team and their shortcomings, strengths, the meta, win conditions, etc., maybe diving top lane actually is losing you dragon control every game. Maybe the meta favors the bot lane getting ahead, and your bot lane is getting dove all the time. Maybe your top laner isn't good enough to carry games anyway. The goal suddenly becomes poorly tied to improving your team's performance. And this is tricky. Even in the LCS, there are some coaches that do this much better than others. Make sure that your goal is tied to improving your team's performance. Now, what about if as a team, you want to gain mental resilience, improve your focus and performance, and become mindful warriors? Do you think that doing the MAC program as a team would be better than doing it individually? And yes, this is an actual question.
Yes, you can do it as a group. Actually, you can message me about group pricing, but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter? Well, before Welden continues, if you don't know what the MAC program is, it is a mindfulness acceptance commitment program that was made to help you gain mental resilience, improve your focus and performance, and become a mindful warrior. It even includes topics to help you become a better teammate, leader, and person. So, if you're interested, head to mindgames.gg/MAC, and because you're listening to the podcast, use the code PODCAST to get $5 off during checkout. That link is in the episode description. Now, why doesn't it matter if you do the MAC program as a team or not?
There's not a lot of pros, and there are a lot of cons of doing it this way. The pros are that you have an accountability group, an accountability partner, and you can talk about it, and you can apply it in your kind of team's structure. The cons are many, in that you're going to tie your doing it to other people instead of doing it to yourself. You're going to start feeling annoyed when your teammates aren't doing it, and you are, or you're not doing it, your teammates are. So you're going to add another thing of a riff within the team. It doesn't really matter if you do it as a team or not. It's an individual long-term project, so it's not going to affect your team's performance over the 3-6 month window. It's going to affect your team's performance over the 1 year, 2 year. It's going to affect your performance over your lifetime. So it doesn't really have an impact on the group setting at the moment, because you need to pair it with leadership and accountability and coaching in the moment to bring out the kind of skills that it's engendering. So I don't think I would recommend it. I would say make this your own kind of personal development plan, personal development ambition, and use it, take the lessons you learn into your team environment, dwell on them and ruminate on them, and figure out how it is that you can become a better person within your team as it is, fulfilling roles that aren't fulfilled, taking responsibility that is be taken, taking accountability and blame when others don't, stepping up in terms of your levels of morality and justice, and empathy and accountability and motivation, outward motivation, and use the program to kind of become who you should be as a leader, and use the environment to practice those skills in. That's what I would recommend doing. But doing it as a team to try to increase your performance, there's much better things to do, like improve your drafting, improve your training routine, improve your VOD review, like VOD review. So those things will have a much more drastic impact in the immediate short term than doing this, which is like a long-term developmental tactic. Or like an optimization, like top 1% kind of tactic. But my guess is if you're not a professional team, then you're not in the top like 0.1% of play anyway, which is where like the 16 top teams kind of reside. So it's not going to help to optimize. You're just going to lose to better players, no matter how in the zone you get. This is the thing I always tell the team. Doesn't matter if you're playing at the peak of your potential as an individual if the other person is just straight up better than you, even when they suck. Like even when they're playing badly. So first, get to the top of the hill. And you can get there faster by applying the techniques from my Mac program, for example. You can get there faster. You can make sure that you aren't like churning your wheels, spinning your wheels, and just like doing nothing when you train. But that's like an individual thing, because the other people on your team might be doing it for different reasons other than to become a pro. They might be doing it for fun or for entertainment or for various other stuff. So that doesn't have anything to do with them.
Teamwork. The funny thing about teamwork is that you don't have control of everything. Your team's success is based off of the actions of you and your teammates. But that also means you have a responsibility for your team's health and performance. So what can you do to help out your team? How about sharing this inspirational quote from a famous actor most known for playing Michael Jordan in the movie Space Jam? He says, "Talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships." And that's all, folks.
Why confuse them with the truth, the truth, the truth?
This segment is the Welden Journey, the part of the show where Welden talks about whatever experiences and thoughts he wants to talk about. This episode, Welden talks about his journey as the assistant coach of G2 during weeks 8, 9, and 10 to finish off the regular season of the EU LCS Spring Split 2017. Here's Welden.
In week 8, we were going to play Misfits, and I was really hectic because I was back in Uvascula and we were in the midst of getting our company acquired by Dojo Madness, Josh and I, my co-founder. And so I was working a lot on that documentation there and kind of the merging plan. And at the same time having meetings with the investor and having meetings with Josh. And I was trying to do one-on-ones with the players in order to kind of make sure that burnout was progressing along, that it was just like a 3 to 5 day recovery. Because usually with burnout, you can recover in 3 days. And if you don't, it's just going to take a week. And if you don't, it might take anywhere from a month to 3 months, depending on how severe it is. So it's pretty important to, nip it in the bud early and not keep pushing hard, at least in physical sports. I think it might be possible to recover more soundly in mental sports because your body isn't as broken. But as far as I know, I wasn't able to check in much with the actual training this week. And then when I watched the games on the weekend, everything seemed to be, coming along fine. They did pick up a loss in the second game, but then managed to close out the series with the third game after adapting a little bit. So I came back in week 9, landed in Berlin, and at this point, I was feeling burned out of dealing with burnout because the atmosphere wasn't really what I would want, as a head coach. And on top of that, there were some visa troubles with one of our assistant coaches from outside of the EU, and so he had to think about kind of going back to his country soon. And so that was a stress kind of laid on the team as well. On the other hand, we had a new chef, and she started making really fantastic food. And so I felt like there was a little bit more homeliness kind of scattering around that could lead to a lot more, I want to say, a relaxed environment where there's just a surplus of delicious food all the time and people start to feel well taken care of. So I felt hopeful about that. And as far as I could tell, things were on the up and up. We had a decent week of training, and I managed to meet with a couple people in shorter conversations, longer conversations. And then we faced Giants on the weekend, and it was a quite easy stomp. But I think that none of us were ready for the challenge the next week was going to bring, because Rocket was on a 6-game win streak or 4-game win streak or something at this point. They were definitely on the upswing, and they had a really good weekend, the weekend that we were playing Giants here. So we'd made it to week 10, the ULCS undefeated, 12-0 so far. And everybody was hoping that, we would have an undefeated season, but at the same time, nobody really seemed to care that much, because this was now the third split that this team by themselves had dominated the ULCS. And they were running on an insane victory streak, something over a year without losing a single match in the European Union. And so I think that some people just kind of didn't believe that. They weren't really worried about it ending. At the same time, it doesn't really matter, because it's just a regular season, scoreline, and there were no amazing records being set, because we had lost a few games or here and there, you know what I mean, but just not matches. And at the same time, people, I don't think, actually believed that they could lose to a team like Rocket. But that's kind of maybe facetious to say, because obviously scrims are never as good as on-stage performance, and we lose scrims all the time in training. But I think that people feel really strongly about their stage prowess, that while we test things in scrims, people are really focused on stage. However, we went into the game versus Rocket, and our compositions were just not prepared very well. And they managed to pull out a victory, which capped off a really strong end of the season run for them, gave them an actual chance to getting into playoffs, and ended over a year win streak in the USCS for our team. And of course, spoiled our perfect season on the last day of the season. What a shame. Our owner was really happy, though. He was actually excited that we had lost there, because he didn't want the pressure of a loss to be the narrative for playoffs. He didn't want it to be, and here comes G2 in playoffs, and they won the last 2 splits. Oh, and also they're on a tear of 400 some odd days without losing or something crazy like that. He just didn't think the added pressure would be any use, and all the social media kind of hype would be around that instead of calming down and just letting everybody play the game. So there were some pluses and minuses coming out of that. Pros and cons.
The Weldon Green Podcast is produced by Sam Hahn, mixed by Sam Turnberg, and content provided by Weldon Green. Remember that this podcast needs your support. Share this episode with a friend that would benefit from the topics we cover. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. You wouldn't want to miss any future episodes. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and other social media platforms. Those links are in the episode description. And don't forget to check out the online Mac program at mindgames.gg/MAC with the code PODCAST for $5 off at checkout. The music you hear is from Happy, and the other music you've heard is from Ramses B. You can find all the music you've heard on this or any previous episodes on our SoundCloud playlist, Weldon Selects. Again, I'm Sam Han, and thanks for listening to the Weldon Green Podcast.